Clara, a name whispered through the narrow streets of Vienna, Austria. A girl not only charming and pretty, but deeply curious about the past. She was an explorer, fascinated by forgotten, abandoned places, chasing stories that time had tried to erase.
Places most people would never dare to enter. Every broken wall, every shadowed corridor, held a story waiting for her. One autumn evening, her restless journey brought her to Prague, a city of breathtaking beauty and buried secrets. The castles stood silent, their shadows long and cold, as if waiting for her arrival. She had no idea that this trip would lead her into the darkest night of her life, where her courage, curiosity, and sorrow would all be tested in ways she could never imagine.
You're new here, aren't you? I heard you were talking to your friend about visiting Prague's abandoned places.
Yes, I'm fascinated by them.
Then you should know, there's a library out in the countryside. It's been closed for years. Some say it's cursed, others say it's just forgotten. An abandoned library, I have to see it.
Clara left the cafe and began walking down the narrow street. The evening light had faded, and the old buildings around her seemed to melt into shadow. Her hotel wasn't far, just a few blocks away, but by the time she reached it, night had quietly taken over the city. The thought of the abandoned library wouldn't leave her. It kept circling in her head like a quiet echo.
Maybe that library, it's open only at night.
The idea sent a chill down her spine, but also a spark of excitement. Minutes later, she was behind the wheel, driving through the nearly empty streets of Prague. The city lights slowly faded behind her as the road stretched toward the quiet outskirts, a long path lined with empty lanes, old houses, and scattered trees. Somewhere ahead, hidden among those still and forgotten streets near the city's edge, waited the old library she couldn't stop thinking about. Clara slowed the car and stopped at the end of the narrow road. The old library stood ahead, silent, dark, half covered in ivy. She stepped out, glancing around the empty street. For a moment, she just stared at the building. Something about it felt both distant and familiar. Then, slowly, she began walking toward it. The air grew colder with every step, and though the place felt wrong, Clara couldn't stop herself. The library was calling. She stepped inside the abandoned Prague library, taking slow, hesitant steps as silence wrapped around her.
This place gives me the creeps. Some places are forgotten, and some should stay that way.
She found herself standing in a vast hall, shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with old, decaying books. The place was silent. Her footsteps echoed across the old marble floor. On both sides, two staircases rose upward. She looked around carefully. Everything seemed frozen, untouched for decades. Slowly, she began walking up the stairs, one cautious step at a time. The wood creaked beneath her feet. At the top, there was a door, dark, tall. Clara slowly pushed the door open. Inside was a smaller chamber, the air colder, heavier. Shelves filled with ancient books lined the walls, but between them stood tall, old mirrors. They slowly moved closer to the mirrors. The air inside the room felt still, unnaturally quiet. She stopped in front of the first mirror on her right. Her reflection stared back, calm, serious, just as she was. Then she turned toward the mirror on the left, and froze. Her reflection was smiling. Clara looked into the mirror again, hesitating. Maybe it was just her imagination, maybe she saw it wrong. She froze as her reflection suddenly lifted a trembling hand, its fingers streaked with dark, dripping blood. Before she could even blink, the reflection began to write across the mirror's surface.
The baby isn't his! I killed him in the library! They know what I did! I lied about everything! It was me! I pushed her!
Terrified, Clara ran, words tumbling from her mouth, confessing her own secrets without even realizing it. When she finally stopped, gasping for breath, she found herself in a long, dark hall lined with mirrors. Each reflection inside them was screaming. Clara started to run to get out from this place, but some force was blocking her way. The reflections were screaming at her, their distorted faces pressing against the glass as if trying to get in. Overwhelmed by fear and rage, Clara grabbed the camera and smashed it into the mirror. Spinning around her like shards of light. From within those broken fragments, a dark shadow began to form, twisting, growing, pulling itself out of the mirror.
You can't escape!
Clara ran desperately and stumbled into another room, only to find a mirror blocking her path. She tried to move, but her body refused to obey. Her reflection in the glass shifted on its own, dark and menacing, reaching out with a force she couldn't resist. With a sudden pull, the mirror trapped her, dragging her into its cold, unyielding surface. The next morning, the library was serene. Birds chirped outside, and sunlight streamed gently through the tall windows. The heavy library door swung open, and a new visitor stepped in, the faint sound of their footsteps echoing in the quiet. As they explored the aisles, their gaze fell on a shadowed corner of the room, and there, inside the mirror, Clara was trapped, her eyes pleading silently,